Doug Bocking was one of the London representatives on our board of directors, and he was on the board for about 12 years. It was his interest and his idea to have the Thames River nominated as a Canadian Heritage River. And Doug's background and his passion was canoeing and the river and the environment, so it made sense. But he very much dragged the authority along with this idea at the beginning, and I had the pleasure actually of getting to work with Doug very closely for about 4 years, working daily with Doug on this initiative. Well, Doug certainly taught me about leadership. He seemed like a very quiet, humble individual, and he is, and yet you quickly learned that he had a gift for mobilizing the community and getting things done. And one of the things I remember very clearly was Doug organizing one of the early meetings to get people interested in the Heritage Rivers designation. So after the meeting, there was a few of us standing in the hallway with a kind of a dumbfounded look on our faces. And I recall it was Glenn Stott, who became a real linchpin in the whole effort. He was a local principal and historian, and Gerald Killen, who was principal at King's College. And the three of us were looking at each other with a WTH look, because we'd all come out of the meeting volunteering for at least 2 committees and other efforts. And we were wondering, how did that happen? But that was definitely one of Doug's gifts, was to get you excited about a project he was involved in and get you to want to work with him. And that was a lesson we learned over and over and over for the next 4 years, but it was a pleasure to do it.
Well, looking back, Doug was the reason I got hired at the Upper Thames all those years ago. They needed background researchers to write the background study for the Thames River report, and I was hired, and Doug was the chair of the background study committee, and he didn't do any of the writing, but he made sure all the timelines were in place, everybody was getting along, deadlines were met, and even after designation, he continued on the implementation committee. He chaired these committees for years. Again, he took he was a humble man. He took a background role, but he came to all the meetings, he came to all the events we hosted. He was ever present and a calming influence to me. As I would get frazzled over deadlines or things not working out or how are we ever going to make this work, he always just assumed it would, and it did, and he helped every way he possibly could.
I had the pleasure of traveling with Doug as part of the Heritage Rivers effort. So in 1998, Doug and I traveled to Vancouver for the annual Heritage Rivers Conference. And Doug didn't know it, but he was going to receive the Award of Merit, which was to recognize a Canadian who had put a lot of effort into mobilizing their own community to benefit the river. So that was great for Doug. But we were there for the week, and he and I shared a hotel in Vancouver, and I was interested. I got up what I thought was early in the morning to go for a run before breakfast, but I'd wake up and Doug would already be dressed in his running clothes, so the two of us would do a 5K before breakfast. Doug was 77 and I was about 33, and we did that every morning. And if we had free time during the week, he took me hiking in North Vancouver, up Grouse Mountain. We hiked all through Chinatown, all around UBC, and it was obvious his interest was making sure I had a good time and saw things that he was passionate about as well.
Even after the implementation committee, sunsetted, and we didn't have a committee that was meeting about the Heritage River much any longer, Doug was well into his 80s and 90s, and I would see him every few years. And the first thing he would ask is, how is everybody at the Upper Thames? What's happening with the Heritage River reports? And what are the happenings? And he was always well in tuned with the community, and was truly interested and what we were doing and what we were doing for the river and how the community was enjoying it. So even though he wasn't himself able to get out as much as he'd like to, he remembered names and places, and just a lovely man.
So Doug taught me a lot about leadership, and there's 3 qualities that I always think of with Doug. And most people who met Doug just assumed he was very quiet, humble, and he was. And yet the first quality I learned from him is never give up. And his efforts, his dedication to this Heritage Rivers nomination was unbelievable. He was basically a full-time employee of the Upper Thames for 4 years. And if you want to ask Nora Pond about it, he kept her busy for 4 years writing letters and thanks. So never give up was number one. Number two was ask for help. Doug was great at the vision and the idea, and he was great at mobilizing people, but he also knew you can't do it alone. So he had a tremendous network of people from the university, from the local canoe clubs, the local natural society, and he just had this gift for inviting you and making you want to help. So that was a real talent. And the third thing was to be gracious and say thanks. And he went out of his way, and he was what I would call old school formal in writing thank you letters for every meeting that he ever had, for every individual he ever worked with. And again, you can ask Nora Pond, because for 4 years I think she typed thank you letters as her primary responsibility. So those three qualities I've kept in mind. It made Doug a pleasure to work with, and every project he pursued, it made it successful.